welcome to Inner Fortitude with Isis. I'm your host, Isis Byrne, and I have a new topic that I wanted to discuss today because, of course, I read way too much and I'm in part of way too many forums. So the topic of understanding women came up, and I had to kind of tackle that one from an emotional intelligence perspective. So a lot of men ask the question, why are women so difficult to understand? And we somehow turned this into a gender-based thing where men can't understand women. And while I'm very, very aware that men tend to think differently than women do, I've also never met two women that are the same. And I've never met two men that are the same. But I don't necessarily think that it's something that's built into us that's just so inherently different that it makes it impossible for other people to understand. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest reasons why I think emotional intelligence is one of the best, developing emotional intelligence is one of the best tools that we could use in developing relationships with people and strengthening those, building better bonds and deeper relationships with others. And so the question was, hey men, do you find it difficult to understand women? And I want to respond to that with a little bit of an explanation on why I have this very strong opinion that you should probably put a hell of a lot less focus on understanding an entire gender and a whole lot more effort and ability into trying to understand that one person. Because it is impossible to understand an entire gender. Every woman and every man, every person is unique in their own ways. They bring their own baggage, they bring their own, and what I mean by baggage is past experience. Everyone has their own history. They have their own lessons learned. Some people never learn some of those lessons. Some people are really good at learning from them. Some people have the way they handle situations, some of their behavior. And if you focus on the gender, you're overlooking the entire person. It is a missed opportunity in developing your own emotional intelligence and nurturing and developing the relationship that you have with this one person. So let me explain what I mean by that and how can you get to the point to where you can start to understand your partner or a potential partner or just anyone in your life, friend, family member. There are a couple of factors, and there are, there are 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. And one of them is self-awareness. And I think that self-awareness needs to be something that you absolutely work on if you're trying to understand other people. Because in order to understand other people, you first need to understand yourself. You need to be aware of why you are acting the way you are, why you are feeling the way you are in certain situations, and the impact that you have when you do those things or say those things, the impact that it has on other people. Being self-aware is one of the very first things you need to tackle in order to better be able to understand others. And I have found that in the gazillion people that I've met in my life, the overwhelming majority of people lack a self-awareness. And maybe they're aware in some things, but they don't necessarily understand the impact that they have on other people. And that is absolutely critical in being able to understand or even be compassionate toward other people. That self-compassion should come first. And this does die into self-love. While I'm talking about emotional intelligence, because this is very, not 100% black and white, because emotions are not black and white necessarily, but it does give you the, I have to kind of understand and nurture myself and try to improve myself before I can improve and understand my relationship with other people. Because you can't just be staying still without moving and without making any changes whatsoever and expect the world to revolve around you. Not going to happen. So in answering the question, why are women so hard to understand? You're never going to understand them, and they're always going to be completely a mystery, an alien life form that you can never reach when you aren't trying to understand what is actually happening and why they are actually feeling the way that they do. So here are a couple of tips, okay? First, look at yourself. If you find that every woman in your life is hard to understand, there's only one common denominator there, and is you, buddy. Is you. So you may find that you're like, gosh, I don't know why I keep finding myself in the same situation over and over and over again. And while it's easier and it's the default mechanism for a lot of people, the default go-to is, it must be them. It's not. If you find yourself in the same cycles over and over and over again, and every woman you meet doesn't seem to understand you, it's likely because you're not doing a very good job of communicating to these women. You're giving something off that is likely being interpreted a certain way by these multiple women, and it is not the woman. It is probably in a very large part you. And that's a harsh truth, but it is truth. So start with practicing self-awareness. And I don't want to get into the details of every single aspect of self-awareness, but how do I become self-aware, ECs? What do you mean? I think I'm already aware. I know who I am. You'd be shocked to learn some things about yourself, because everyone that has felt like they know themselves really well before actually consciously practicing self-awareness is in for some shocks about themselves. One of the, a super quick tip, start journaling. At the end of the day, reflect on the day, reflect on the events. What did I do today? What were the outcomes? What were the reactions of the people around me? What was my reaction? Did I get emotional about certain things? Did I feel certain things about a certain situation? Write down those events, write down how you felt, write down your reaction, and see if you can also identify, did you bother to look around the room to see if anyone else noticed that you were upset? How did what you say, or what you said or what you did, impact the people around you? Start to observe. Be conscious of, when I'm angry, look around and see what that does to the people around you. Your kids, your spouse, your friends, your family. When I got mad, did you raise your voice? Did raising your voice make an impact on someone else? Start to really observe the world around you and observe how internally you were feeling, what started it. Your response to other people's emotions has an impact, okay? And you may think that you are justified. I'm justified in feeling angry. I'm justified in the way that I reacted because they made me feel that way. No, your reaction or your response to someone else's emotions is absolutely 100% your responsibility. And if you responded in a way that was maybe scary to someone else, or maybe it was hurtful to someone else, you should be aware of that. And you've got to ask yourself if that was the right way to respond. Could you have done better? How could you do better? Learn from your mistakes, from the smallest mistakes. Be observant of your own actions. That is developing your emotional intelligence, right? That self-awareness piece of it. It leads you into self-management, which is one of the other pillars. You can manage your emotions after that. Once you recognize that you have those emotions, you can then manage them. So if you are aware of the impact that you have on other people, and you're managing the emotions, and you're starting to observe how your emotions are impacting other people, you're going to find that your communication skills start to go up. You're improving your communication with this other person. You start to ask questions like, maybe you never noticed that your partner responds very defensively every time you yell. Maybe you're scaring somebody. Okay? Even if you don't think, I'm not dangerous, I would never. I understand that. But some people, fear is one of the biggest, the roots of a lot of our defensiveness. And if someone else is responding with anger or responding with fear, and they feel like they need to protect themselves and they start getting defensive, ask yourself what you're doing to make them feel that way. And is there a way to approach it differently so that they're not afraid and you can actually get to the root of the real problem? Because chances are, whatever problem you were trying to tackle, you've just compounded issue on top of issue, because now the person on the receiving end isn't comfortable talking to you anymore. So they shut down, or they stop communicating a certain way. And everyone will go, oh, but that's girls, women do that. Why do they do? Well, women, just like any child, just like any man that is approached with fear, okay, when we start to feel that, we have a reaction. We have our bodies and our minds and our words and our behaviors we act on those emotions sometimes. And if we're acting on it, what we need is for someone to help us bring that down. And if you're not helping bring it down, you're not resolving the issue, and you're not getting to the bottom of understanding why they felt that way in the first place. So my suggestion is to start journaling, start observing every single day. Look back and go, what happened? Start to be aware the minute that you feel an emotion. Ask yourself, what is the emotion that I'm feeling? And how can I best address that? What is the best response to this particular event? You will think before you speak, you will think before you act, and you may find that once you start, go, okay, now I registered, I'm angry. Am I raising my voice? Am I starting to insult somebody? Am I starting to, intimidate the people around me? Am I making people uncomfortable? And once you start doing that, you can start going, okay, I'm aware that I'm making people uncomfortable. That's not the outcome I want. What I want is something else. So how do you get there? I can tell you, anger doesn't typically get you where you want to get. So I would consider other areas to explore. But in my adult life, the more I became aware of the way that I react when I have certain emotions, I was better able to stop reacting, like having a knee-jerk reaction to those emotions. And I was better able to just think about the way that I'm communicating it, think about the words that I'm using, think about the tone that I'm using, and consider the audience. Consider where they are. Where's their emotional state at the moment? What could they be going through that makes my words less impactful? And once you start to do that, there's an intelligence behind the reactions that you make. And you start to understand the other person. You understand yourself, right? And your impact and why you're doing what you're doing. It makes it easier to go, okay, acting with compassion, ask them questions to get to the bottom. Be curious, man. The people around you, you're not a mind reader. So if someone is demonstrating that they're uncomfortable or they're in a bad place, the last thing you need to do is dismiss them as if it doesn't matter, which unfortunately happens a lot when we get uncomfortable with other people's, emotions. We dismiss it and we're just like, I don't want to deal with that. Don't talk to me about that. I have no idea what you're going, this thing right here, I don't want to deal with it. And so you dismiss it. And it doesn't resolve anything. All you're doing is leaving that person to feel potentially like they are unimportant. Misunderstood, right? They feel misunderstood. They feel rejected. They can feel a million different emotions from the reaction that you might have had to walk away and not want to deal with it. But if you sat there with it and you tried to understand their emotions and identify it, and as soon as it starts, right, don't let it get bad. Say, hey, I noticed that you seem a little upset. Is it something I said? Ask the question. If it's something you said, say, okay, I didn't mean it that way. Give me an opportunity to explain. You can fix this problem by simply nipping it at the bud, by recognizing the emotions while they're not that intense. Unfortunately, what happens with people who have a low emotional intelligence, right, a low EQ, they don't recognize the signals at all until they're way off. They're not just annoyed, right? I recognized it when they were enraged. And if you don't notice that someone is upset until they're at the far end of the spectrum, you weren't aware. there are ways to manage that. And so I wanted to address this today because I thought this was one of those things that come up. I am one of 8 kids. I have 5 brothers. Five. My 5 brothers, I've repeatedly heard how women are complicated. Women, you can't understand women, and my guy friends, same thing. It's this category that they put the women in, that we are all, we don't know how to process emotions, or we can't be understood. We're so complex. And I'm not saying we're not complex. We are. But that doesn't make it impossible to understand. Understanding women is not difficult if you focus on just one woman at a time. So that's my advice to those of you who think that you can't tackle an entire gender in the understanding. You can. You just have to stop looking at it like, oh, I've got to understand all of humanity. Don't do that. You're never gonna understand humanity because you don't know everyone's story, but you can begin to understand one person's story. You can begin to observe and understand, where they might be coming from, even if you don't agree with it. You don't have to agree with people to be compassionate. They may have completely different opinions about things than you do, and that's okay. You're not supposed to have the same thoughts. That's not normal. So try to understand the way they feel, the way they think, maybe some of the history that goes behind it. If you find that there's a pattern in this one particular person, that she tends to get very defensive as soon as you raise your voice, you might want to start asking questions. I notice that you go into this mode whenever I get upset. Talk to me about it. Ask open-ended questions. Let her tell you. You may be surprised at what you learn. And if you were aware of those things and you're willing to change because you're aware because somebody just gave you feedback on your behavior, learn from it. Take it as constructive criticism. You can grow from that experience. And poof, you grow as a person. Isn't that what we all want? I just find it easy to become overwhelmed when you're seeing life that way. And I think that it's about time someone told you that it isn't women and it isn't men. We do that a lot. We generalize. And I think that culture plays a very big part in that they go, okay, well, men are men, boys are boys. This is the way that things are. And, women are like that. And there are some things that might be true on that. Some stereotypes generalizing some of the behaviors might be somewhat true. But have you stopped to ask questions though? What are the expectations of women? They're not the same as men. So cut us some slack for being individuals impacted by society. It doesn't mean that we're so complex that you can't understand. You just need to take the time to get there. Take the time to learn it. Trust me, I think that we're all worth it. You are worthy of being understood. I am worthy of being understood. And self-awareness, I think, goes a very long way. Self-awareness that leads to self-management. You start to understand the emotions of others, start to understand the impact of your own emotions and behaviors on other people. It's an awesome thing, and anyone can do it if you want to. So start by journaling. And journaling. And this is one of the coolest tips that I learned. And until you go through this exercise, you probably will not have noticed. So an exercise in self-awareness, real quick, that I want to share. If you're starting to journal, if you haven't started to journal, maybe it's a good time to start, right now, just doing the whole reflective work. It's unlike a diary in that when you're writing, oh, dear diary, you're telling a story about everything that happened that day. And, and these are my feelings and these are the things. There's no real goal in a diary other than to vent about, and to write and document your story. When you are journaling, for the purposes of self-awareness and problem solving, you are writing down data. Okay, you're writing down data. In other words, I'm not creating a story. What I am saying is, this is what happened. This is the reaction that I had emotionally to it. And now you're coming up with solutions, right? Coming up with how best to respond. What did I learn? All that kind of stuff. One of the exercises that I had read about and is extremely eye-opening for somebody who thinks they're self-aware but may not be so self-aware. Write down a timeline of all the important moments of your life from birth to the present. And this might take a while. And you may even find some wake-up calls in that, oh, that happened before that. So if you built a timeline and you went from birth till now, all of the major events in your life, they don't have to be big, but they had an impact on you. Some things that come to mind that you're like, that had an impact, a death in the family, a birth in the family, an anniversary of something, any events, something traumatic, something that was painful, your first boyfriend, your first, girlfriend, anything like that you feel was relevant in your life. Write it down in the journal. And the point of this exercise is for you to understand some of the influences that may have played a part in who you are today. A lot of things that you may not necessarily have in the forefront of your mind, but they become a part of your story. Okay, the data that is you. So I thought this was a really, really cool exercise. It is pretty eye-opening when you really stop to think about some of those events that took place and some of the impacts that some of those previous experiences may have had in your past or current life. And so I would highly recommend that, doing the reflective work, in self-awareness, and also trying to kind of start with learning your story, the data that makes your story, whether it was a divorce, your parents' divorce, you're, moving to another state, you're, joining the military, like whatever it is that builds your story, that is who you are, things that have impacted your life, write them down. I think it can be very eye-opening. It's a very good exercise in self-awareness. And therapists use this all the time to try to get people to understand, the parts that moments in their life have played in their current decisions and current emotions relating to certain events. You might be surprised. So anyway, there are a lot of others. I will definitely be having a self-awareness topic at some point. Excuse me. But I guess I can probably just wrap this up just by saying, stop putting women into buckets and men into buckets. What you're doing is actually separating yourself from the truth of the situation. And that is usually that you didn't put the time and effort into understanding that one person. And so you've held on to this belief that they're all the same. They're all the same. They're not all the same. And if you stop to understand just one, you may actually find that it's easier to love them and easier to forgive once you understand. So anyway, best of luck to you. If this is something that you've been wondering about, I hope it was educational to some degree. I just had to speak up about it. I couldn't stay quiet. So take care of yourselves. Put the work into becoming self-aware. It is absolutely worth it. You are worth it. Be kind to yourself. And I will see you next time.